Planning Commission does several things. The most important is zoning. However, if there was going to be any annexation, that would come in front of the Planning Commission first. It comes to the Planning Commission and then they make the recommendation to City Council. And we do that on several things, not only zoning and annexations, but there are some ordinances that will come in front of the Planning Commission before they go to City Council, and they come to us for recommendations. Anything that has to do with land use, zoning, signs, all that comes to the Planning Commission before it goes to City Council. Planning is the most important thing a city can do so that it has the correct and proper growth. Without planning, you just have a hodgepodge of, well, we'll build this here, we'll build that there. You're going to have residential next to commercial. You're going to have industrial mixed in there, and that's not what you want. What you want is where everybody, when they buy a piece of property, they can rest assured that this is residential and it's going to be residential, and that they're not going to put an industrial plant in right beside my residential neighborhood. One of the instruments that the Planning Commission use is a land use study that was done within the last 7 or 8 years. And it was a very comprehensive study done by the Planning Commission and approved by City Council. While it's not a rezoning tool, it does give us a general outline of this part of town should be used for commercial, this part of town should be residential, etc. And we use that when something comes in front of the Planning Commission as a rezone. We look to the land use study and say, what were we thinking when we did the study, and does this fall into that realm? When a proposal comes in front of the Planning Commission, we will look at how big the piece of property is. Now, we have guidelines that we have to go by. You can only have so many units per acre, depending on how it's zoned. So is this the proper zoning? Does the zoning need to be changed? Does it need a special use permit? All of these factors go into the decision and our recommendation to City Council on whether or not this project should go into this area or if the property should be rezoned. So you have to take everything in consideration. How far is it from the fire department? How big are the water lines? Could it handle, if there were a fire at this location, could the fire department handle it? Everything comes into play, and there's not one single thing that makes the determination, but it's a combination of all of these factors that will help us with our decisions. Let's take as an example the former Southside Shopping Center. That was a vacant piece of property. It's been vacant for almost 10 years now. It's about 7.5 acres of land. It was not going to be residential. It really was not going to be commercial because it's what we refer to as one-off. It was just off of the Volunteer Parkway. However, we had a developer out of Johnson City who looked at that property and he saw a good reuse of that property. He did some investigation, did a market study, and saw that Bristol was underused, or underserviced rather, by apartments, by high-end market rate apartments. So he talked with the owner of the property, and they cut a deal, and so he had a contract to put apartments there. So before he can get a building permit to go in there, he had to submit a plan to the planning staff, and then he met with the Planning Commission and he applied for a special use permit. The special use permit was advertised rather extensively in the neighborhood and in the newspaper, and we had quite a turnout, as a matter of fact. The turnout was so large that we moved it from our normal meeting place over to the Slater Center because the crowd was that big, because they were that interested in what was going in there. Because after all, it's been vacant for all these years. Now what's going to happen? So the plans were out. It's 120 units. It's going to be a $7 million investment in a piece of property that's just sitting there and is doing nothing. It will bring I think it's going to bring redevelopment in that area. I think you'll see other pieces of property along the Bluff City Highway that will redevelop now. When you have that kind of investment in our city, in that neighborhood, investment brings other investments in. But he had to go through a very rigorous process of presenting plans. He had to come in front of the Planning Commission twice. First he had a conceptual plan, and then he had his final engineering plans that we looked at and we tweaked, and it will look very good. It'll fit in to the neighborhood, and it will really, really add to that area.